States. We have people from Colombia, Belgium, El Salvador, Kenya, and the Philippines. So my name is Sister Esperanza Principio. I am a Marinol sister and the co-coordinator of the Marinol Monarch Initiative.
Welcome everyone. My name is Maria Torres, and I, along with Sister Esperanza Principio, am a co-coordinator for Marinol Monarch Initiative as well.
In solidarity with the World Day of Migrants and Refugees, which we commemorate this weekend, and the U.S. National Migrant Week, which concluded yesterday, the Marinol Monarch Initiative joins you in honoring the lives, struggles, and resilience of the migrants and refugees, both here and around the world. This hybrid event, Migrant Accompaniment in an Era of Mass Deportation, is a call to justice and action. Our speaker will guide us in this sacred journey of accompaniment and discernment. After his presentation, there will be question and answer portion, after which the closing activities of this event will be some announcements coming from Maria and Daniel Izaraga, the mission director of the Marinol Lay Missioners. And then we will have the recitation of the Cabridi Pledge. But before I allow Maria to introduce our speaker, I would like to invite you to have a silent prayer invoking the presence of God and the intercession of Our Lady of Fatima for all the refugees and migrants, for all the suffering and displaced people of Palestine, along with our personal intentions. Amen.
Hello again. The Monarch Initiative is very pleased to have Mr. Ruben Garcia join us today in addressing the important and relevant topic of immigration accompaniment. Ruben Garcia is the founder and executive director of Association House in El Paso, Texas, where he has dedicated over 4 decades to supporting migrants and refugees through advocacy, hospitality, and education. Ruben Garcia was born and raised in El Paso, a border city with deep connections to both the U.S. and Mexico. His family lived on both sides of the border, which shaped his understanding of the complexities surrounding immigration and the lives of those seeking refuge. This background instilled in him a commitment to social justice and humanitarian aid. Please welcome Ruben Garcia.
Thank you so very much. It's a delight to be here with you this afternoon, and I'm very grateful for those of you that are in other places that are joining in. As I look out over this room, I'm saying to myself, all of my friends are really masochists because you've all heard me speak multiple times, and yet you come back for more. So I know a couple of counselors and psychiatrists. If you want to go and talk to them, they might be able to help you in the future. Right now, we're in such a difficult moment. And this afternoon, I'd like to talk a little bit about this moment that we're in. The title that was given to me was Migrant Accompaniment in an Era of Mass Deportation. And the attitude toward the migrant is very, very sad. You know, after World War II came to an end, and when President Eisenhower was in the White House, there were 16 million. And at that time, the Army was heavily male. There were 16 million soldiers that, when the demobilization of the armies in the Pacific and Western Europe, and all of these millions of soldiers started to come back, they wanted their jobs back. Many of these jobs have been filled with people from Mexico who came over. And so there was this very significant deportation, and under Eisenhower, 1 million people were deported. And I think it's important for us to keep that in perspective as we reflect and sit with what is presently happening. Story of Annunciation House, because Annunciation House, from one I would like to she decided to be here so she can make sure that I keep my memory correct when I tell the story, you know. We actually spent about a year and a half gathering, and we would usually gather on Thursday evenings. And the group that gathered fluctuated. It wasn't a formal group. It was anyone who was interested in gathering to talk about how does one live life in El Paso, Texas, at the end of 1976, 1970. How does one live life with a greater sense of purpose, meaning, and depth? That's really what we were wrestling with. Everybody is under the impression that Annunciation House came into existence to open up a house of hospitality for refugees. That isn't why it came into existence. Annunciation House came into existence to respond to the desire of a small group of young adults who were asking themselves the question, how do we live life with a sense of meaning and purpose and depth? That's what we were wanting to do. And that really came out of the experience of all these young adults. It came out of the experience of being very involved with youth and young adult ministry for the Diocese of El Paso. Very, very involved. It was an incredibly active department of the diocese at that time. And it was having fallen in love with that work, that ministry to high school students, to young adults and college working, et cetera, that then inspired some of them to say, I would like to be part of that discussion. The reason that I bring this up is because if we want to consider accompaniment in an era of mass deportation, we're going to go back to a very difficult challenge. And that challenge is what's going on in my heart. What is my heart calling me to? You know, I speak to a lot of people. I speak to a lot of groups. I speak to a lot of pastors from different denominations. Everybody wants to know, how do we move forward? And I said, you know, if we want an answer to that, we're going to have to go into our heart, because I'm going to tell you, pastor, priest, I'm going to tell you, what are you going to do on a particular morning? Your office manager calls you and says, Father, pastor, This morning when I came to the office, there was this family, this dad and his wife with two kids, and they're from Central America, and they crossed the river and they spent the night behind a bush here, haven't eaten, and they have no place to stay. What do you want me to answer to the heart? The answer to that is in the heart, because especially right now, what happens to us is we are caught by fear. We are caught by fear because I get the phone call, and the first thing I want to know is, what does the law say? What does the law say? And we're having a very difficult time. We're having a very difficult time. So we look at the environment in which we're living, and it's so heavy, but part of the reason I am being weighted down is because I haven't had a conversation with my own heart, and I haven't asked myself, what am I being called to? I, right now, am so grateful for that year and a half of those meetings that we had on Thursday nights. And sometimes there were just a few of us, 2, 3 of us. Sometimes that group grew, and there might be 10, 11 of us. We gathered, and now that I look back, I'm really, really surprised that we lasted. I'm just blown away. We lasted every Thursday, and we were very faithful to those Thursdays of gathering to wrestle with the question, how does one life have sense of purpose be in El Paso in 1977? Oh, how does that happen? Something that was immensely helpful to me. It was a gift. And that gift was in these discussions, in these times when we would get together, one day sitting and reflecting on the fact that the God of creation identifies first and foremost with who? We all know the answer. With who? The poor, the unwanted, the enslaved, stranger. We all know the answer. The thing about that is that this little group, when you go around the group and we ask ourselves, am I poor? We'll answer no. If I go around, are you among those that God identifies with first and foremost, whether we use the word God or Allah or Creator? You're all going to say no. Tonight, how many of you are sleeping under a bridge? Please raise your hand. How many of you have not had anything to eat today or yesterday? You know, you must be doing some lab work. We don't identify among the poor that God has said, they are my people. A lot of people get upset when I talk this way, because everybody is like, all right, if God doesn't identify with me, then when does God? And then afterwards, people come up to me and say, clarify this for me, God, because I'm not for God doesn't identify. When does God identify with me? And I look at them and I say, that's a wonderful question. I really hope you come up with a really good answer. Then they get even angrier with me. The reason that was such a gift is because it helped me to understand that if in 1976, in 1977, if I want to experience my life with greater purpose, meaning, and depth, I have to go out in El Paso and find those people that God identifies with in El Paso. And I'll be honest with you, in the beginning, we didn't know who that was. And we actually spent quite a bit of time once we moved into the second floor of that old building that is Annunciation House, walking the streets and encountering people on the streets to begin to get a sense of who might these be in El Paso. Then it happened. We ourselves had no resources. We had no income. We had the building that the bishop lent. We rent. But we had no real income, so to speak. There was no funding. We didn't ask the bishop for any money, which made him really, really happy. But he was willing to lend the building on the second floor rent-free. And one day, a young man who came and let us know he didn't have any place to stay, and we referred to one of the two existing shelters at that time, came back and said, the place you referred me to will not let me stay. And we could not understand. It's a shelter, that's the business. Why won't they let you stay there? And the answer was, porque no tengo papeles. Because I'm undocumented, I don't have documents. We did not realize that in El Paso in 1978, if you were undocumented, you would not be allowed to stay in either of the two existing shelters. There were only those two shelters. It was that experience that allowed the five of us who started Annunciation House to then say, then we will take him in. And there started a journey with the undocumented. We will take him in. No fanfare, no press conference, no signs on the wall. What that was us having a conversation with our own heart and understanding that therein the God in our heart is saying to us, well, this is what you said you wanted. And so we took him in. And right off the bat, the questions about the legality. Is this legal? Is it not legal? What does it mean? Will we be arrested? All of those questions very quickly surfaced. And you know the truth, even though we asked the questions, even though we wondered out loud what this might mean, it didn't in the least stop us. There was one undocumented person. Word of mouth, there was a second undocumented person. Third undocumented person. So the numbers slowly but surely grew. More and more undocumented people staying at Annunciation House. I will tell you something. Our hearts were absolutely, totally full. Were absolutely total full. We were exhausted. Our days were very long. They were very full. There was just endless things that had to be done to be kept up with meals and toilets that may be clogged up, etc. But our hearts were full. Because the God of creation, who had made it so clear that this God identifies first and foremost with the very least among us, had called us to begin this journey. Let's now jump 50 years later. That hasn't changed. That hasn't changed. is the hospitality with the least different because of everything that's going around us? Absolutely. But if my heart is heavy, it's heavy because I'm not speaking to my heart, to the God that is in my heart. You know, if we look back a little bit at history, something that really catches my attention, one of the very first acts that Congress passed on immigration, called the Immigration Act of 1891. That act is the one that created the immigration structure, the Naturalization Act that created the immigration structure, the beginnings. At that time, it was deposited within the Department of Treasury. So in the beginning, immigration was part of the Treasury Department. In that act, it authorized the first funding for officers to be hired, to be employed, to begin to oversee the borders of the United States. In that act, you can believe this, it says that it prescribed rules for the immigration officers protection along the borders of Canada, British Columbia, and Mexico, instructing the officers hired, their inspection was prescribed so as not to obstruct or unnecessarily delay, impede, or in any way passengers in their ordinary travel between their country and the United States. The officers, so the next time you go over to one and you're coming back and you're crossing, the officer stopping, you make sure to call the Immigration Act of 1891 and remind him for their job, requires them, their inspection be done so as not to obstruct or unnecessarily delay or in any of the passengers in ordinary travel between Mexico and the US. The very first 180 officers that were employed, 180 officers were employed, 119 of them were assigned to Ellis Island to help with the arrival and the movement of refugees. 60 were assigned to other areas of the United States. You know how many of those 180 officers were assigned to the US-Mexico border? One. One officer. You know, we really are in a great position to tell President Trump that we can save him a lot of money by reducing the numbers to the numbers assigned in 1891. There was one. 1999, when they realized that one officer probably was not sufficient for the entire US-Mexico border, Congress increased funding and increased staff to 4. So that we're now 4 officers watching the entire border. Did you know that toward the end of the 1800s and the beginning of the 1900s, that the Arizona Farmers Association appropriated a budget that today would probably be, in those dollars today, it would be several $100 million to launch an ad campaign to try and recruit people from Mexico to come to Arizona to help develop the agricultural industry in Arizona. They spent all of this money putting ads, posters, trying to recruit Mexican people to cross the border, go to Arizona, and help them with their agricultural industry. This is an example of how we look at our neighbors across the border as exactly that, as our neighbors, nuestros vecinos. They were our brothers, they were our sisters. Vénganse para acá, necesitamos tu trabajo, es una buena vida, come on over here. When the United States entered World War I, and we had to send millions of men to Europe, and we lost labor, we then recruited Mexicans to come in to fill those labor, nuestros vecinos. When World War II comes, again, we turn to the people of Mexico and say, they are our neighbors. They are our hermanos, hermanas. That's how we viewed them. That's how we treated them. What is now this huge divide is the result of us distancing ourselves from the conversations that need to take place within our own heart. And the fear has been engendered within us so that we now find ourselves continually looking to see what the law says and allowing the law to be what guides us rather than to go inward and ask ourselves, what is it that I'm being asked to do? What I am asking myself again, and what I ask myself day in and day out, is how do I live life with greater depth, with greater meaning, and a sense of purpose? And that is my North Star. That is what our North Star should be. And that is what we should use in helping us understand what it is that we are meant to do. The language that is now being used against the refugee is incredible. And it's very important for us not to sit with that, but instead to go back inwardly and in there discover what I am being called to do. The call right now and the work that follows from that is, first, that we continue to do the work of hospitality across the entire country. Right now, as an example, Annunciation House maintains 2 of its houses fully operational. Who are the guests? Who are the refugees that are in our houses right now? First, there are those people that are feeding and bonding out of ICE detention facilities. They have friends, they have family. They were able to go before an immigration judge. The judge set a bond for them. Family and friends post the bond, and the refugee gets released. whether they are from El Salvador or Guatemala or Venezuela or Ghana or wherever they're from, they get released. And when they get released, they come to us. They come to our houses of hospitality because they have someone who is able to generate the money to post the bond. In all instances, they are also able to buy plane tickets, and so they don't stay with us very long. That's one of the groups that is with us. We also receive the age outs. These are the unaccompanied youth who get picked up by Border Patrol, and then they're turned over to the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And some of those that cannot be reunited with families while they're in these facilities, they reach the age of 18, age out, contact them. Get releases from hospitals, people that have health issues. Some instances of control or ICE not want to have this person in custody, and so they release them. Are you willing to take them in? We will take them in. Other people who are also staying are some families, a mom with a child, a mom with two children, a dad with a son, individuals who have made the decision, I want to go home. I no longer want to stay in the United States. I want to go back home. And is there a way that immigration can help me get back? This usually has to do with the ability of people to board planes, and because all of the airlines require government issued IDs, which usually means the passport, and many people don't have a passport. It's complicated right now. We probably have 3 or 4 families with us who are wanting to go back home and are having a very difficult time going back home because they can't access passport. So we have that group of people. We also have some families that, because their employment authorization is no longer being renewed. You have to remember that when President Trump took office, he canceled everything. So if you were in the United States with TPS, temporary protective status, which allows you to get employment authorization, he canceled that, and being able to renew your employment authorization has become next to impossible. The tens of thousands of people who entered under CBP-1, that program that President Biden had initiated, where people in Mexico would make an appointment and enter through the port of entry. And because they came in through the port of entry, they became eligible for employment authorization. All of those have had their employment authorization canceled out, so they can't renew it. People that got paroled in, individuals that applied from their home country, have made it, entered or granted employment authorization, they cannot get their employment authorization renewed. So we are seeing here and there more families that can no longer sustain themselves because their employment authorization is expired and the places where they work can no longer keep them employed, and they can't pay rent, and they're trying to see how they can continue to survive. We have that group of people. This kind of hospitality is not a hospitality that is restricted to El Paso. This kind of hospitality you're going to find in all parts of the United States. So the work of hospitality is a work that needs to be continued across the entire United States. And so that continues to be a very real need. The process, the experience of inviting people to look inward and ask themselves a question: who am I? What am I becoming? And especially to help people respond to the characters that we have gotten into this custom where we stick our brush into the paint of criminality and then take out that brush and we paint everything and everyone with that paint. Think of refugee, think of refugee, murder, rapist. Anywhere someone commits a crime, if that person is a refugee, we highlight that, we broadcast that, we make everybody afraid, even though all of us understand overwhelming refugees are law abiding. Okay, all right. So that's another area that falls on us, and it especially, I believe, falls on our faith communities, our churches, where all denominations. I have been asked to speak to groups of pastors of different denominations, and they bring up to me the challenge, the difficulty that they have preaching the homily that includes the refugee, the topic of what God calls us to, because afterwards their own members come and say, Pastor, we really would appreciate it if you would stay out of the politics. Just stick to the gospel and don't bring up the political. And many of them begin to feel intimidated by it. And I'm saying, you know, this is not a responsibility that falls only on the pastors. This is a responsibility that falls on all of us as members of faith communities to look for ways to tell the story of the refugee, of migrant, the reasons why they leave their home country. But Annunciation House started, and that very first refugee arrived, and you sat down and you asked them whether they were from Mexico, and they were from Mexico in the larger numbers, but very soon Salvadoreños and Guatemaltecos started to arrive. When you sat down with a refugee and you asked the refugee, why did you leave? He gave us one of two answers. Because I'm hungry, or to feed my family, or if I take you over to Annunciation House right now, or to Casa Papa Francisco, and you sit down with refugees that are with us, and you ask them the same question, why did you leave Venezuela? Why did you leave Guatemala? The answer is the same. It hasn't changed. Because I was hungry. The reason people leave their home hasn't changed. What has changed is you and I. You and I. And it's going to fall on you and I to go inward as the first step in going outward. We go inward to re-nourish ourselves, to reconnect with God that calls us to this in the first place. You know, because of the struggle that we're having with Texas State Attorney General, who wants to shut down Annunciation. We just last week we got a second decision from the Supreme Court of Texas because we had appealed the original May decision. We appealed that decision to them and asked them to reconsider that decision. We got the response this past week, and their response is it's denied. So in a sense, we are now waiting to see what the Texas Attorney General, what the Texas Attorney General's next step is going to be in their desire to shut down Annunciation House. Many people in different parts of the country, many people are under the impression that Annunciation House is now closed, that it's not functional. Well, it's absolutely functional. It is still receiving and hosting refugees. And as long as we breathe, we will continue to do that. And, you know, it's in God's hand what the next step is going to be. But we're going to continue to do that work of hospitality. That's what God calls us to, and we're going to continue to do that. We are looking at legal strategies as we go forward. When you look at what the Attorney General says about the work of hospitality of refugees, he wants to make it seem the work of smuggling, trafficking, operating stash houses. He wants to say a refugee no es mi vecino, no es mi hermano, no es mi hermana, no está bienvenido. The reality is that we respond with a resounding, yes, they are. They are our neighbor, they are our brother, they are our sister, and our faith, our God, from the interior calls us to continue to welcome the refugee. Those of you that are here from El Paso, I know many of you, you are already involved. You already have your hands fully immersed in accompanying the refugee. And I'm saying, what does that accompaniment look like in the era of mass deportation? It looks very much like you and what you are doing. That's what it looks like, you know, and it's a matter of growing that. For those of you that have joined us through the internet, etc., I would say the same thing, that it is you. It looks like you and the work that you are doing in welcoming and continuing to walk with the refugee. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. We're now open for some questions.
Thank you for your insightful presentation, Ruben. That calls us to go back to our hearts, you know, where there is a love that we can share and continue embracing the refugees and migrants. So now is the time for us to have this question and answer. And anybody from the floor can raise their question. You can be heard without the microphone, so just raise your voice a little bit louder so we can hear. Yeah, please.
Hola, how has the relationship with CBP changed over the day?
Well, I'm not sure that I want to respond just to CBP, because CBP is the umbrella organization that includes the ports of entry, the personnel there, and it also includes the Border Patrol. And that's different than ICE, it's different than Homeland Security investigation. Those are different branches all within the same umbrella. I would say that our relationship with the Border Patrol continues to be good, even though there's been a very significant change. Up until about 2016, 2017, Border Patrol would go out and apprehend people. After they apprehend them, Border Patrol has no intention. A lot of people don't understand this. Border Patrol only has holding things. So if I'm Border Patrol and I detain you, I'm going to take you to my facility where I'm going to process you. I'm going to hold you there maybe 1, 2, 3 days, but then I can't hold you beyond that period of time. After I finish processing you, I call ICE. ICE is the one that owns all of the detention beds. And so I will call ICE and I will say, I have this individual and I turn them over to you. ICE is the one that is supposed to say, yes, turn them over to us. And then I, Border Patrol, I'm done. I'm done with my work. I only apprehend people. ICE then makes the decision, do I hold on to her until she goes before an immigration judge, etc.? The problem with ICE is that they have historically not had enough beds to hold the number of people that Border Patrol apprehended. In 2014, when the families started arriving in significant numbers, Border Patrol was apprehending significant numbers of families, processing them, and turning them over to ICE. ICE had no family detention facilities, so ICE would get them, and ICE started in the El Paso area, called the denunciation house and asked, and once Border Patrol turns them over to us, can we then send them to you? We will release them with their documents and they can travel. Will you take them? And we said, we will. This started in 2014. And this continued up until 2017, 2018, when the numbers of people being apprehended by Border Patrol surpassed the ability of ICE to process the numbers. And so ICE then said, there's just too many. And they went to Border Patrol and they told Border Patrol, you're going to have to start releasing people yourselves. And so what was 2018, 2019, 2020, from then on, Border Patrol started releasing. They didn't want to do that. And now, because the numbers have plummeted, Border Patrol has gone back to that previous role, and they're not releasing anybody. So if there are releases, one came into existence, then the port of entry officers, they began to receive upwards of 200 per day under CB1. They, all of those people, our network. And so at that point, we asked Border Servant Corps to take on the responsibility of receiving all the CBP1 entries. And they opened up a facility here on Brook Hollow, Vista Nueva, and they also had a facility in Las Cruces so that all of the CBP1 entries could go there. And ICE was to a great extent out of the picture. Now with Trump, it has changed. CBP1 no longer exists. No one is being allowed to enter through the port of entry. Border Patrol is not releasing anybody. And so the releases that we do get are with ICE. There was a meeting this past Thursday that is called a stakeholders meeting that was initiated by Border Patrol about a year and a half ago, and these meetings would take place maybe once every 6 weeks. And I found those meetings are very important because at those meetings you had to have leadership and you could address problems that came up. In addition to that, you know, the head of Border Patrol, the head of ICE, the head of the ports of entry, CBP, were there, the county judge, the mayor, chief of police, the sheriff, all of them were there. And so it was possible at those meetings to address any issues or problems. We were there because we were the ones who were receiving all of the people being released. It was a very helpful meeting. Once Trump was elected, they were discontinued and they were just reinitiated this past Thursday. I went to the meeting and I was hoping that ICE would be present, but ICE was not present at the meeting. And that was very unfortunate because that's the organization that we interact with on a regular daily basis right now. To give you a sense, a year and a half ago, in our sector, in the El Paso sector, which includes from Fort Hancock all the way to the Arizona border, the state of New Mexico, and of course El Paso up to Fort Hancock. That is the El Paso sector. The El Paso sector a year and a half ago was apprehending between 2,000 and 2,500 refugees per day. Today, Border Patrol is apprehending about 40 refugees per day. Along the entire border between the United States and Mexico, a year and a half ago, Border Patrol along the entire border was apprehending somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000 to 10,000 refugees. Today, across the entire border, they're apprehending about 500 refugees per day. So you can see how significant the number of refugees that are being apprehended has declined. I don't know, maybe they really are working to where they can only have one immigration officer for the entire border. I don't know. Another question?
Before proceeding to the next questions,
There are three
questions. Like,
one is if you are working, if the station house is working in Ciudad Juárez, that's the first one. The second one is who are you currently serving in the station house? Because they couldn't be at that when you talk about that. The third one is the former volunteer who's asking if you were accepting volunteers currently.
Yeah, the questions, who are we serving right now? Very quickly, we're serving people that bombed out, we're serving the age outs, unaccompanied minors that turn 18. We are serving people who have lost their employment authorization and can no longer sustain themselves economically, can't pay their rent. And so we are also serving some people that have medical issues that get released from hospitals and they're coming to us. So 2 of our houses are fully functional. Our census in both of the houses are low, but we are very much in operation. As far as volunteers are concerned, yes, we continue to receive volunteers. We have the year-long volunteer. We have 4 arrival dates for year-long volunteers: February 1, May 25th, August 1, and November 1 for individuals that want to come and spend a year with us. In the summer, we have a summer internship that begins on May 25th for 10 weeks. One possibility. And lastly, we also are accepting volunteers that are willing to make a minimum of 2-week commitment. So right now, just this past Saturday, we received 3 week-long volunteers, one from Alaska, that came from the northeast part of the country. And so people that are interested in coming for short periods of time, it's 2 weeks. You arrive on a Saturday, you begin Sunday, and you go for 2 weeks. And we're pretty strict about that. You can't do the 2 weeks. We ask you not to come until you come the 2 weeks. Everyone's going to have to provide a background check, and you have to be healthy and able to do the work. What was the third question?
You're working in Ciudad Juárez.
Oh, we are working in Ciudad Juárez insofar as assisting families that got trapped in Ciudad Juárez. One of the most tragic things was when people were entering under CBP 1, there were two entry times. So you would apply, you would fill out an application on your cell phone, and they would do all of the biographical information on you and all the members of your family. And then they would confirm that your application had been received, and then you were told, now you're going to have to wait for an appointment. When you would get your appointment, the appointment said you are to present yourself on August the 5th at 6 o'clock in the morning at the Paso del Norte. Or you are supposed to you present yourself on August 5th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And so they would ask people to line up, and then they would come in and get a process at the Paso del Norte Port of Entry. On the day President Trump was inaugurated, I got an email, a text, and I can't tell you who it's from. I got a text that said to me, Ruben, if you have any way of telling anyone who has a CBP1 appointment for 1 o'clock, tell them not to wait till 1, tell them to present at 6 in the morning. Because there is a time difference. President Trump was inaugurated at 12 p.m. on the 20th, which is 10 a.m. in El Paso. After the inauguration ritual, he went to his office to sign executive orders. One of those was to close everyone who had an appointment for 1 o'clock that day, and there were 100 families that had. All of them were canceled. So you had been living in Querétaro, you had been living in Mexico City, you had been living in Guadalajara, you had been living in Zacatecas, and you finally got your appointment, 1 o'clock on January 20th, and you came up to Juarez, and you were in Juarez waiting for your appointment. All of a sudden, that was one of the most difficult, painful experiences, because all of these people were like, what happens to us now? And of course, there's no answer. Many of those people have gone back, some of them to the interior of Mexico, some of them trying to see how they can make their way back to their home country. Some of them have decided, let's see if I can make a go of it here in Juarez. So those families, there's an effort in Juarez to try and get them legalized in Juarez so that they can work legally and begin to reduce the exploitation and otherwise affects them. So we have been assisting with getting some furniture, getting some clothing, getting some travel bags for some of these refugees that are in Juarez. And we work a lot with the cathedral in Juarez in that way. Other questions?
There is a person who wants to ask.
Can you unmute Accompaniment?
Yes,
You have a question?
yes, thank you. I'm wondering where you send, do you have a place where you send the unaccompanied youth that have turned 18?
Most unaccompanied youth have someone who can receive them. If I am 17 years of age and I get picked up by Border Patrol, I'm going to be turned over to ORR, and ORR is going to place me in one of the licensed detention facilities for unaccompanied minors. The social worker there is going to strive to connect me to a sponsor that is family in the United States. But what happens is that some of those people are documented and they do not want to comply with the requirement for reunification. In other words, in order for me to go to my brother, to go to my sister, to go to my aunt or my grandparents, my family member is going to have to do a finger background check, etc., of everyone in the household. And some of them don't want to do that because you are in effect turning yourself in, and they're afraid. So they won't. So then what happens is I reach the age of 18, I age out, they come to us, and then once they're with us, their family says, we'll buy a plane ticket, and they're on their way. So overwhelmingly have family members that they don't.
Have questions from here?
Over there,
Please come here and say your question.
loudly.
Not over the microphone because I was told they cannot hear and you don't use your microphone. Please say your name and your organization. So we know who you are.
I'm Glenn Park. I'm here with Ms. Diaz's theology class for Catholic social teaching. My question is, what advice would you have for young people who want to try to make a difference for these refugees but aren't really sure where to start?
Great question. Great question. First, I can say the same thing that I said to everybody else. Go inward. Go inward. Diosito, ¿qué quieres de mí? ¿Qué me estás pidiendo? What are you asking me? So go inward. That's for all of us. Go inward and then listen to what that response is within yourself. I think that there are many wonderful organizations that are presently working with refugees here in El Paso. So whether it's Annunciation House, whether it's Las Americas, whether it's Estrella de El Paso, there are many organizations here that work with refugees where you might be able to connect with. And I'm going to give you a very, very practical, down to earth. You and your friends can launch an underwear drive. We need men's underwear sent over to Juarez for the men who are being deported by Border Patrol through the port of entry. That is a very specific request for all of you. As an example, so things that you can do. One example, is you're going to go on an underwear drive. Okay? You can bring it to Annunciation House and then we'll get them forward to but there is a very specific need for underwear for men. Number of people that are being deported. I happen to be in Juarez when one of the group ordered the way it works is Border Patrol or ICE takes to the Paso del Norte and then they walk over bridge, and then on the Mexican side, Mexican immigration says to them, if you have no place to stay while you figure out how to get back home, you can come and stay with us. And so they have you've seen all the tents there by where Pope Francis had the mass. So they have places for them to stay and meals and etc. I was there when one of the groups arrived, and they were all men. They were all, I would say, in their 30s, between upper 20s to early 40s. They came in, and all of them looked absolutely shell-shocked. When I started speaking with them, one said, I've been living in the United States for 20-something years. I had my home, my family's there. They picked me up when I went to a convenience store. One after the other. Imagine if right now somebody came and took all of us, detained us for X number of weeks, and then put us and sent us back to some country. We would be utterly, completely shell-shocked. And it was very, very tragic. So when they get sent back, with nothing. They don't take any luggage, they don't take any bags, no backpack, nothing. They're fortunate if they get their cell phone back. They get to Juarez, and Mexican immigration right now is running 2 or 3 buses where the bus goes to Mexico City, but it stops at about 4 or 5 major cities along the way, and the refugees can get on the bus and they can get off at whatever major city is closest to the town they're from. From that city to their hometown. Interestingly, those buses in Mexico are escorted by Mexican military units because of the concern. One of the cartels stops the bus and kidnaps for ransom. This is Mexico's own government feeling the need to provide security because these are people that are coming back from the United States, and the cartels figure their family back home must have money. You know? So we do the travel bags. We put together travel bags for them to go back, and we need to get underwear. So, pardon me? Yes, the underwear has to be new. It has to be new. So please, on the way out, nobody please need your underwear, okay? It has to be new. All right? Any other questions?
One question.
Pardon me?
Apart from learning the law of 1991, I think that was one of the
No. This was one of the very first immigration acts that Congress passed. Yes. So, listen, it's been a delight to be with you. Thank you all so much for coming. As I said, I know many of you. Thank you for the work that you do and your spirit. Adelante. Let us go inward. Let us renew, and let us continue to be committed to what God calls us from our own hearts. Thank you.
Everybody, we pledge to offer a more Thank you so much. Sisters, may all go well as you travel back. May all go well as you travel back to your places. May all be safe.